Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So I just finished reading Invested by Danielle Town and Phil Town. Now, to be honest, I went into this book thinking there wasn't going to be much in here for me, that it was going to be very basic. And I got to say, guys, there is so much great information in here. There are so many gems. And so today in this video, I want to share my 12 big takeaways from Invested by Danielle Town. So let's dive right into it. Number one, I really liked Phil Town's definition of investing here. I want to drill it into my head, so I'm going to share it with you guys. So real investing is about having a high degree of certainty that you're going to make money because of the difference between what you paid and the cash flow value you bought. Okay? Everything else is speculating. I love how straightforward that definition of investing is. Takeaway number two. So, our whole lives, we've really been influenced by the financial industrial complex. And it's drilled into our heads that there's really only two ways to generate more money, to build wealth. The first way is to spend less and save more. Okay? Kind of the frugal approach. And the second option is to abdicate, to hire a professional money manager to grow your wealth for you. Because clearly it's too complicated for a small investor, for someone like you and me to do well in the stock market. There's too many pitfalls, okay? So let's talk a little bit about those two ideas. The first one, which is to save your way to retirement, to be frugal. Because of inflation, we really have to earn 3% each year, right? That's the number, kind of the average number that the government provides. If we're not earning at least 3% per year, our money is losing value, okay? We have to earn 3% just to break even. Now, I like the example that was given about houses in Portland in this book. So houses in Portland over the last 65 years have grown at a rate of 7% per year, meaning it costs 7% more each year to buy a house in Portland. Okay? So, if you have ambitions to buy a house where you live, say it's in a city where there's been increasing demand over time, a 3% inflation rate doesn't do justice to your actual situation in terms of what you're up against with the time value of money with inflation. So I really like that example. It hits home this point that, 3%, if we're aiming for 3% to break even, we're still going to lose ground in a lot of other areas of life where our dollar is losing purchasing power at a rate faster than 3%. And then he mentions, or Danielle mentions, inflation hurts savings but helps stocks. And the reasons it helps stocks, company revenue and earnings, they all rise with inflation, right? And then the other piece of that, I mentioned hoarding. I kind of talked about inflation with hoarding, the issue with saving, and then abdicating. The big issue with abdicating is that in order to pick an investment manager that's going to do a good job for you, you really have to know enough about investing to be able to evaluate their investment approach. Is it actually going to give you the results that you want? There's no shortcuts to that. If you don't understand investing, you're not going to understand how to pick someone to invest your money. So, the bottom line there is we really have to learn how to invest for ourselves. And that's really what this whole book is all about. Danielle Town's journey from knowing nothing about investing to feeling quite confident in terms of picking stocks, value investing. Point three, okay? This one really jumped out at me. So for a long time, I've really had this kind of pie in the sky dream of investing in alignment with my values, right? The things that I care about in the world. And at least for the first part of my investing journey, I really haven't been able to figure out how to merge those two, my values and my investment dollars. And I think that's a very common thing that people experience, is this discrepancy between what I care about, what I believe in, and what's happening in my investment portfolio. Danielle Town says, we can support the mission of a right-acting company by buying its stock, right? We're voting with our dollars when we're investing. We're saying, I believe in this business, I believe in this management and what they're doing, and I want to support the impact that this business is having on the world. Now that vote, when you invest your dollars with a company, it exists whether you're aware of it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not. Most investors ignore it, right? But there's another side to that. There's a flip side. You can embrace the fact that it is a vote, that there is an impact when we vote for a company with our dollars. The big issue that I've struggled with is that most people who try to invest in right-acting companies, they try to invest in alignment with their values, they almost always do so at the expense of a good return, right? They're sacrificing return in order to kind of invest in alignment with their values. So my hope, and this book kind of planted the seed for this hope, is that I can identify companies that act in alignment with what I believe in and what I care about, and just apply, this Rule 1 framework to these companies, and be patient and, not sacrifice return, but be able to generate 15, 20, 26% per year by investing in alignment with my values. So I appreciate that this book kind of watered that seed that I've had for a while. Point 4. When the market is rocketing to the moon and I'm being left behind, so Phil Town is saying this, keep an eye on the Shiller PE and the Buffett Indicator. So one of the hardest things about investing is when the market has gone up, 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 up for a long time and it's continuing to go up. It's really hard to have patience to wait for a company that you can buy with a margin of safety. And the purpose of the Shiller PE and the Buffett Indicator is to stay rational, okay? These are two measures that kind of show the valuation of the market as a whole, the S&P 500. How do prices compare to value? And if you can look at these charts and see, wow, we're currently off the charts in terms of price as compared to value, it can help an investor maintain rationality and patience, especially when you understand that markets are cyclical. So we may be at a peak now, but we're not going to stay at that peak. One of the surest things in the stock market is that things are cyclical, right? What comes up must come down. So Shiller PE, I'm going to link to these two graphs in the description. Shiller PE is cyclically and inflation-adjusted earnings of the S&P 500 over the past 10 years compared to the total market price of the S&P 500. Okay, and then the Buffett Indicator is the ratio between the market as a whole and national revenue, right? GDP. It's probably the single best measure of where valuations stand at any given moment, according to Warren Buffett. In terms of where we are now with the Buffett Indicator, I believe we're at the second highest level since 1971, which is as far back as this particular indicator goes. We're at the second highest level. The only level higher was during the dot-com bubble. Okay, so that's that's interesting. The Shiller PE is at 32 right now. And I don't remember, it's the second or third highest level that it's been in the recent past, in the last 50 years or so. I think maybe in the last 100 years, actually. But like I said, I'll link to those two charts in the description here. Point 5. So Munger has 4 criteria that need to be satisfied. Charlie Munger has 4 criteria. He will not make an investment if these 4 criteria are not met. Criteria 1, it must be a business he is capable of understanding. That makes sense. It must be a business with some intrinsic characteristics that give it a durable competitive advantage. All right. We want to make sure we're buying a company that's going to be stronger 10 years from now. And that's really what the Moat does. It protects that business from competition coming in and taking away market share. The third criteria, he would like it to have management with integrity and talent. Okay. And then the fourth criteria, it must be a business he can buy with a margin of safety. He must be able to buy it at a price that's lower than what it's worth. Okay. Now, points 2 and 3, the Moat and management. Phil Town actually has a set of numbers that we can look at to evaluate both the Moat and the management. And we'll get into that in a little bit here. Right, let's go right to Moat. That's the next point. So we're going to look at page 121 here. Charlie says that once we've decided we're capable of understanding the business, right, that's the first criteria, the next thing to determine is whether the business has an intrinsic competitive advantage that is durable. Okay? In Buffett's investing strategy, this concept is referred to as a moat. Phil Town says, think of the life cycle of a company. The company is founded to meet a need and solve a problem. They solve that problem and meet that need, and probably over some number of years, the problem or the need becomes obsolete. Right? There are very few companies that last 100 years. Notice where a company is in that life cycle, and what gives it a long-lasting, durable, intrinsic competitive advantage to stick around as long as possible. So that's kind of a description of how to think about a moat. Now, there's 5.5 moat kind of categories. You know, what creates a moat for a company? 1 is brand, right? 2 is switching costs, when it's difficult or expensive for a customer to switch away from a company's products or services. 2.5, which is related to switching, is network effects, right? You think of Facebook. You know, if you try to leave Facebook, you're leaving your whole network, and you kind of have to start a new network. The third one is toll bridge, when a company has a monopoly or near monopoly in their industry. Number 4 is secrets, when a company has proprietary secrets that protect it from other companies copying it. And the 5th one is price, when a company is the low-cost producer, okay, because it can make its product more cheaply than anyone else, right? Costco is an example of that. So that's just kind of an overview of moats, which I think is really valuable. Let's talk about the big 4 numbers that indicate a potential moat. Okay. So we're looking for net income, and we really want to see how these change over time. We want to see that they're growing over the last 10 years. Net income. Number 2 is book value, which is also equity. Number 3 is sales or revenue. We want to see that sales are growing over time. And 4 is operating cash. And if you have access to Phil Town's Rule 1 toolbox on his website, you get a 30-day free trial, and then it's like $30 a month. You can plug in any company in the US, and it will automatically create a spreadsheet of these big 4 numbers. looking back 10 years, 7 years, 5 years, 3 years, so you can see how it's changing over time. How that moat, how these numbers that indicate the strength of the moat are changing over time. And Phil Town really wants to see these big four numbers growing at least 10% or better each year. Okay. So that's the moat. Let's look at the three numbers that relate to the quality of management, which is Charlie's third criteria. So management numbers, return on equity is the first one. Return on invested capital related to return on equity. And then debt. All right. So I'll just give you a quick preview of what those are. So return on equity is just net income over equity, right? The number of shares outstanding times the price per share, or the market cap, right? That's the equity. Return on invested capital is net income over equity plus debt, right? So it's the invested capital, it's all of the invested capital, not just the equity, which is the shareholders' capital, but also the debt, which is, the people who are buying the bonds for the company. So it's basically, it's those two groups of stakeholders in the company. And then debt. So if there's any long-term debt held by the company, we require the company to be able to pay it off with 1 or 2 years of earnings. Okay. The biggest reason an investment doesn't work out is the company has too much debt. And if we can pay that debt off with a couple years of earnings, it's considered kind of a manageable level of debt. It's not going to get us into trouble if it's within that range. Right, so those are the three numbers that relate to the quality of management. Let's talk about the three methods of pricing / valuation. This is really the bread and butter for me of this book. I really appreciate having three different ways to get a sense of how does the price compare to value? How does what I'm paying now or considering paying now compared to what I'm going to get back? So the first method of pricing, it's really Buffett's simplest way to put a price on a business, and it's called the 10 cap method. Okay, 10 cap pricing method, and it's based on owner earnings, right? So owner earnings are the amount of cash that can go into the business owner's pocket each year without affecting business operations. So cash that can be taken right out of the business from earnings, and the business can keep humming along each and every year. So the formula for owner earnings. So this is not from the book. This is from a more recent podcast episode that Phil Town and Danielle Town did. So this is a little simpler than what's in the book. The formula for owner earnings, you want to take historically reasonable operating cash flow. So there's three numbers. The first one is operating cash flow, which you can find in the cash flow statement. And historically reasonable just means, we don't want a number where the last 12 months are really out of line looking back at previous years. We want kind of a normalized operating cash flow number. So just make sure it's not super high. If it's lower than average, that's fine. That's just going to make our 10 cap price method more conservative. But we want to see that it's reasonable as compared to the past. So you've got that operating cash flow. You're going to subtract your historically reasonable maintenance capital expenditure. Okay. So this is money spent on long-term stuff that has to be replaced just to keep the business going. It's not capital expenditures that are used to grow the business. It's just to maintain the business. Now, often a company won't break out what growth capital expenditures are versus maintenance capital expenditures. But take a look at the 10K, the company's most recent annual report. Do a search for capital expenditures, and hopefully they break out what the maintenance is. If they break out what the growth is, you can just take the total capital expenditures and subtract the growth capital expenditures in order to arrive at a maintenance capital expenditure. A rule of thumb, if they only provide the total capital expenditure, is to just take half and assume that that's the maintenance capital expenditure. On average, there's kind of a range. Companies spend between 20% to 80% of CapEx on maintenance. So it's a pretty big range. Better if we can nail it down a little bit more than that just kind of average 50% number. But yeah, that's the second number, maintenance capital expenditure. And then you're going to add income tax, okay? And the reason for that, this 10 cap pricing method is really, we want to do it the same way we would value real estate, okay? We're considering owner earnings before we pay income taxes. That's just the nature of the beast here. So we're going to add back in the income tax in order to arrive at the owner earnings. So that's the first one, 10 cap. The second one, payback time, right? This is Phil Town wrote a book called Payback Time back in 2010. It's his most recent book, which is one of the things I really loved about Invested. It's like we get to see what Phil Town is teaching pretty recently, rather than looking at Rule 1, looking at payback time. Those are 10 to 14 years old. So it was great to get kind of an update on how Phil Town is valuing businesses. So payback time, it's the number of years it takes to get your whole purchase price back, okay, from free cash flow. So the formula is free cash flow grown by the growth rate for 8 years, okay? And I'm going to go more into these pricing valuation formulas and kind of steps in another video. I'm going to do these 3 10 cap payback time and margin of safety valuation on a company in a video soon. So don't get too hung up on these things. Just want to introduce them. So the reason for 8 years that we want for our payback time, public companies sell for 16 times free cash flow on average. That's kind of the whole purchase price of the business, what it takes to buy a public company, 16 times annual free cash flow. We want a 50% discount. So we're going to do 8 times annual free cash flow, the last 12 months of free cash flow. That's the payback time. We want to pay a price where we're going to get our money back in 8 years from free cash flow. The third one is the margin of safety valuation, okay? So the 10 cap and payback time are pricing methods with margin of safety built in. This is a valuation method with a margin of safety built in. So they're a little different. We want to calculate what I expect to sell the company for in 10 years, then work backwards to arrive at a price I'm willing to pay. So the way we do this, we have earnings per share, right? We're looking at the last 12 months. Hopefully it's historically reasonable. Earnings per share times 1 plus the growth rate to the 10th power. That's going to give us our future earnings per share in 10 years. Now we're going to take that future earnings per share times the future price to earnings ratio is going to give us the future price, okay? And like I said, in another video, I'm going to go through kind of step by step how to calculate each of these things, kind of the rules of thumb. It's also in the book, Invested, if you want to do that right away. So we've got our future price in 10 years. Now we want to get that future price back to today. What is a reasonable price for the business today based on that future price? Well, we're going to demand a 15% return on our money, right? So we're going to discount that future price 15% per year to get back to today. And according to the rule of 72, it takes about 5 years to have our money with a 15% rate. So, 5 years, 10 years, we're going to have the price twice in order to get back to today. So we're going to divide the future price by 4 to get a reasonable price today. Now, we don't want a reasonable price today. We don't want to pay a reasonable value today. We want to pay less than what it's valued at today. We want a 50% discount. So we're going to take that reasonable price today, multiply it by 50%, or divide by 2, same thing. We're going to get our margin of safety price. So that's it, guys. Those are the 3 methods of pricing / valuation in this book. The next point I want to talk about, inverting the story. So as humans, we are very susceptible to emotional biases and errors of judgment, okay? And one of the great ways to save ourselves from doing that when it comes to investing is inverting the story. The more we study a company, the more we like it, the more we want to feel like we've found the investment that's going to make us rich, right? And so what our minds do is we dismiss or explain away anything that's negative about the company. And we look for information that supports how we feel about the company, the great story that we have for the future of this company. So we really need to have checks and balances against that. And one of those is a checklist that forces us to look at potential flaws in the business. Now, there's a checklist in this book. It's called the Checklist of Expensive Errors. It's on page 233. I'm not going to go into it now because, it would take too long. But it's an awesome checklist relating to different aspects of the business and questions that every investor should ask themselves to make sure we're not overlooking anything in our effort to convince ourselves that we've found the next great investment. Okay, so invert the story. Come up with a story about why this is a bad investment. Even if you love the company, it's a really important exercise. The next point I want to talk about is this concept of an anti-fragile portfolio. Okay, really important concept. I really like this one. So I'm going to read something from the book on this. In his book, Anti-Fragile, Things That Gain from Disorder, Nassim Nicholas Taleb suggests that great results come from strategies that benefit from chaos, to the point that they are anti-fragile, a term coined by Taleb that means something that benefits from and is made stronger by adverse events. Fantastic. Of course we want that in our portfolios. There's adverse events that happen all the time in the stock market. So let's talk about how this anti-fragility applies to a portfolio. Companies with a durable moat do not just withstand or barely eke through market chaos. Wonderful companies generally benefit from events. If there is inflation, their moat protects them from competition, and they can raise their prices as their costs of labor and materials rise. Even better, the companies with the biggest moats have the highest profit margins and can use major downturns to eliminate their weaker competition through mergers, acquisitions, price wars, and other aggressive tactics. Great businesses emerge from recessions and chaos stronger and with more control of their market niche. As owners, we get the benefit of that, as their stock prices will eventually follow the increase in their market share and cash flow. I mean, you look at what's happened with Amazon, right? Since, this pandemic started, I would argue it has gotten stronger as a result of this pandemic, right? As a lot of companies at the same time have gotten much weaker. And then the second reason our portfolios are anti-fragile and index portfolios are not is that we wait in cash for events that bring the prices down. they don't. Okay, we have the advantage of being able to wait. Portfolio managers don't really have that luxury. Okay, people are paying them, regardless of whether they make money for them or not, to do something. As individual investors, we don't have to do anything. We can wait and wait and wait until, a company on our wish list gets into our buy zone, and then we act. So that's a huge advantage, and something that contributes to the anti-fragile nature of our portfolios. So that's that one. Another thing I really liked is this concept of buying in tranches. Okay, so say I've got 10 companies on my wish list. I'd love to put 10% of my portfolio in each one. Now, say Facebook is on my wish list. It gets down to $150 per share, which is my buy price. What do? Well, I don't want to do nothing. And the reason I don't want to do nothing is, the price gets into my buy range and then it goes back up and it's out of my buy range, and I've missed an opportunity to own a business that I love or that I want to own at a great price. The reason I missed it is because I got greedy. I saw, okay, this is going down. Has been going down for a while. Obviously, it's going to keep going down. I want to get a lower price. I'm going to wait for a lower price. That actually happened to me with both Facebook and Uber recently, this year. So the suggestion from Phil Town is to buy in tranches, right? When it gets down to your buy price, put in 25% of what you're going to allocate to that one company. So if you want to allocate 10% of your portfolio, put in 2.5% when it gets to your buy price. Then you wait until it gets 10% lower. Put another 2.5% in. When it gets 10% lower still, put another 2.5% in. And then finally, for the last 2.5%, you wait until the price starts coming back up again. And then you deploy the final 2.5%. I like the buying in tranches because it's a nice balance between having that greed, like wanting to get in at a lower and lower price. That's real, and it makes sense to do that if the market is falling, or if the company that you're watching, that you're wanting to buy, is falling. It's great if you can buy it even cheaper. So, but it also forces our hand to do something, to put some money in when it gets down to the buy price, not to just completely sit on the sidelines with greed and, wait for it to go lower and lower. I've made that mistake. It is not a fun mistake to make, because now I'm sitting on the sidelines with no ownership in Facebook, no ownership in Uber. So, it's kind of a happy medium. I really like that. And then the last thing I want to leave you guys with, how to think about stock prices falling. I really liked how this was framed here. So when stock prices are going down, think about it like this. If I sold you a $100 bill for $50, okay, would you be upset at your purchase if you now can buy another $100 bill from me for $25? And would you be really angry at yourself if I then offered you another $100 for $10? That is really the way to think about falling stock prices. If you know what a business is worth, and you can get it with a margin of safety, you should be happy to buy it, right? Of course, you're buying $1 for 50 cents or whatever it is. Now, if it keeps falling, it's so easy, and this is for people who don't really understand the business, it's so easy to look at the market as, the wise one. The market knows something that I don't. The price keeps going down. I made a mistake, okay? I don't understand this business. I need to get out, right? And that's when you bail as the stock price is falling. You bail at a loss. But the intelligent thing to do is first to understand what the business is worth, and then buy in tranches, right? And be really happy that the price is going down, because it's costing you less and less to buy the same ownership share of a business, of a cash flow generating business that's going to be generating cash for decades into the future. So I really like that frame for how to think about when stock prices are falling. So that's it, guys. I highly recommend this book if you guys haven't already. If you like any of the books that Phil Town has put out, it's really an encyclopedia of, stuff that Phil Town has done in the past, updated to 2018. That's when this book was published. So, and what I shared here today is a fraction of the notes that I took reading this book. I wish I had more time, and I wish my throat didn't dry out so quickly to cover more. But we can continue this in the comments. Let me know if you guys have any questions about any of this stuff. What were your big takeaways from Invested by Danielle Town? What do you think of the Rule 1 Toolbox if you have a subscription to that? I just got a subscription, and I am really excited about just the ability to pull up those 10-year historical numbers for the Moat, the management, calculating the 10 cap, the payback time. It's just so useful. It saves so much time, the Rule 1 Toolbox. And like I said, you get that trial if you want to see how it all works. I don't have anything to gain by pitching you guys the Rule 1 Toolbox. Do whatever you want. But I found it to be really useful. So anyway, I will leave it at that, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.